has been, there's many positive innovations and shifts in business practices that have resulted. Being able to get so many distinguished people assembled for a tech webinar in Newfoundland in February is one of those accomplishments. So we're very happy to have this group assembled here today. So I want to thank Minister O'Regan. Not only is Minister O'Regan hosting us today, this was Minister O'Regan's baby. I ran into the minister at a restaurant there shortly after the Verifin announcement about the acquisition. And the minister, being the dutiful, good son that he is, was dropping his mom off to visit with her friends for lunch. And he came over, he said, Craig, he said, we need to talk about this Verifin thing. And he was, of course, all excited, as he tends to be, about the successes in Newfoundland. And he said, we need to do something. We got to celebrate this. We got to have an event. We got to talk about this. We got to talk about how we can do more of this. And I said, well, sure. So I'm sure TechNL is fully behind that. Anyway, so Minister and his team got together with Paul Preston and Marlene and our team at TechNL and put this together today. So thank you for that, Minister. And the panel that we have today, we probably wouldn't have been able to do that without you making some phone calls as well. So we really owe you for that. So, what Verifin has accomplished is nothing short of incredible. There's a reason that we call companies like Verifin unicorns. It's because unless you've seen one, you don't really believe that they exist. Well, I guess we all now believe in unicorns because there's one right here in our province. And there are other billion-dollar tech companies here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I don't have any particular insider information, but I can tell you that I look at companies like Sequence Bio, what they're doing, Colab, Other Ocean, Kraken, Avalon Holographics, Solus Power, Breathe Suite, Blue Suite. I could go on. I'm going to mention ClearRisk in there too, but that's just self-serving. All have done incredible things. That they've made incredibly innovative IP that are completely disrupting their products and markets in the industries that they're in. So there are others here. So we've come together today to celebrate Verifin's successes and to try to understand how it happened against all odds in this remote place that is known for more traditional industries. And yet now we've become a powerhouse in the national and international stage in terms of technology. So we need to figure out how that happened and how we can learn from it, right? So we also got to have a frank discussion about what it means to the Newfoundland tech sector and the province overall. It's overwhelmingly positive. How can we create more Verifins and how many can Newfoundland and Labrador support, right? How many Verifins can there be here? Talent and capital, as we all know, have been elusive commodities. So how do we make sure that we have enough of both of those, plus all the supports, so, groups like MCE and Genesis and TechNL and a lot of others. So how do we make sure we have talent, capital, and supports to be able to create more Verifins? And we need to build companies small, medium, and large, so that there's lots of great successes, companies that are millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. Not everybody's going to be a Verifin, but that's not the only metric of success. Far from it. We've got a great pipeline of talent here and a lot of great people. So we need to figure that out. So hopefully we can have a frank conversation today about how we're going to do that. So many many partners in the ecosystem, along with TechNL, as well as with a lot of support from the federal government through the minister and COA and NRC and others, as well as to the provincial governments, have been very supportive of our initiatives around talent development, for example, because it's a huge problem, but it's a huge opportunity. There's a big talent gap, and we need to fill it. We need to get kids in school coming out thinking about tech, starting businesses, being developers, getting into the business side of tech. We need to get more immigrants coming to Newfoundland who have skills that we can't create here in the short term. We need to bring back repatriate expat Newfoundlanders. That there's a lot of talent in the world. Newfoundlanders live in other places. How do we get them back here? So we need kids coming to school. There's lots of people in the industries that may go through peaks and valleys. There's some industries that are on the increase, some are on the decline. How do we make sure that we have a really well tech-enabled, tech-trained, and diverse workforce that is able to move around in case one industry is doing better than the other? Go to the industry where they're trained. So we need Memorial University and CNA to we need more seats for computer science and the other sciences, but also the business sides. There's a lot of SaaS businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador, and that requires certain specific talents. Private colleges like Kean College are stepping up and created programs to help fill this gap. We need more of that. So all these great things are happening. We also talk about capital, and actually we're going to spend a fair bit of time on capital today at 11:30 in our panel. Our hope today is that we can identify ways that we can continue to grow and scale the Newfoundland tech sector. But as we talk about a lot at TechNL and through our partners, the tech sector isn't a silo anymore. All companies, all industries are highly tech leveraged, tech enabled. The fishery now is very high tech. Mining is very high tech, aquaculture. So we need a very high tech workforce, and we need investment in that sort of innovation and that economy if we're going to thrive and prosper in the future, which we're all optimistic will happen. So with that, I want to turn it over to Minister O'Regan, who's going to present his distinguished panel. Thank you very much again, Minister, for putting this together and for hosting us today and for all you do on an ongoing basis. And I'm not just saying that. Anybody who's followed it knows you're incredibly supportive of the sector, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. It's funny you should mention Kean College. I think my first coding classes were in Kean on Campbell Avenue in the 80s. That'll date me. Back when we didn't have a Best Buy, we didn't have Amazon, and I had to mail order my Atari 800 XL from the States and get a mail order from the Bank of Montreal, and being very excited, graduating to a 3.5-inch floppy from a 5 1/4. I'm speaking a language probably half of you don't understand me, I don't. But very early on, living here with the Celtic Tiger in the 90s, I saw parallels. I was in my 20s, and it was clear to me that here was a jurisdiction very similar to ours that was now known internationally as the Celtic Tiger. What were they doing? What could we learn from them? And thanks to the Rotary Club here in St. John's and Happy Valley Goose Bay, they shipped me over there for a year to study at University College Dublin to look at exactly that. None of what I learned is new to you, 20 odd years later. The advantages that they have are some of the advantages that we have. A highly educated workforce, an ability in a smaller jurisdiction for government and industry and workers and universities to work closely together and to be nimble. That is extremely important, something that they used very aggressively. One area that they had us on was people. The peak age of their demographic, or of their baby boom, is just a couple of years younger than me. But it just goes to show that how important immigration is, and immigration has become very important to the Irish too. It is about talented people. And if you don't have enough of them, then you need more of them. That's how you grow your economy, and then you retain them. When I came back, I started working for the government on some of you may be familiar with Operation Online, and Natty was in its first stages, and we had some very early successes with Soft World '98, getting one of the world's biggest software conference here in St. John's. We were a group of people. We felt like the dogs who caught the car, but those were early markers and early successes. And now here we are with Verifin, one of the biggest acquisitions in Canada. It took place here. It's manned, some who are joining us today, but it's manned by, from what I can certainly see, a fine group of patriots, people who believe in this province and who want this company to grow here in this province. So yeah, when I saw Craig, it was like, we got to sit down in a meaningful way as a community. I want to revisit this. I mean, in the past year, our economy, oil is very important to it. I've spent an awful lot of time, obviously, as Minister of Natural Resources, on oil and gas, and making sure that it is competitive. And you know, the tech sector, how we can work with oil and gas, it's limitless. Not only can we do stuff here in this province, but I think that we can do things in export. But tech in this province stands on its own. It stands on its own. And when people make the political arguments about we have to diversify, indeed we do, but it's not a zero-sum game. You know, tech here stands on its own. We want to make the pie bigger for all the industries that are important to this province. But this one is central. I really believe that. And so we want to learn how, you know, how Verifin happened, how we can have more Verifins, what we can do to build in this province. I think, and I share this with our next two guests, so just so people know, you know, if you look at what's coming up, we've got I think a great chat coming up with an all-star panel, I would say, on how to attract investments. We're going to be talking to Adina Friedman, who's the CEO of Nasdaq, and speak to her about what's happening and her interest in Verifin, how it happened, and her commitment to this province. I had a great chat with her last night, and I did early on when the deal happened. We're also going to have some breakout sessions coming up too, and I'm looking forward to attending many of those myself. But my next two guests are friends of mine, but very, very well placed. This is nepotism. Very well placed to speak to this issue. One of them is my friend Mary Ng. She's the MP from Markham Thornhill, and she's Canada's Minister for Small Business, Export Promotion, and International Trade, all three of those together. I met her initially when she was Chief of Staff to our other guest. And that is Sheldon Levy. He is now special advisor to Mary Ng, but then he was president of Ryerson University. And what he did with the digital media zone there won international accolades. He created one of the best incubators in the world. And he gets it. And one thing, Sheldon and Mary, I invite now to pop up, but one thing that Sheldon got when I brought him here about 4 years ago to say, you know, look, I'm looking at ways that I can grow the industry here, is he went downtown and he went, you got it. You got the royal jelly. You got creativity. And I think that is something in this province that, you know, we obviously know. I mean, creativity, our culture, it is in our blood. But there is a way we can weaponize it. And I think that that's what I'm intent on doing, that we have our creativity, our artistic community is becoming, I think, a competitive advantage. Somebody told me a long time ago that innovation, one of the definitions, and Sheldon could correct me, of innovation is the practical application of creativity, which I thought was kind of cool. We do lots of creative and amazing things, and you know, our artists are incredible. How can we further do that, and how can we make sure people make a great living from it? In some cases, maybe get really rich. I think that's marvelous. I want that to happen to more people. Okay, without further ado, here to have a broader chat, and then we'll be taking questions in the chat room too. Dr. Sheldon Levy and the Honorable Mary Ng. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
I meant to keep that introduction short, and I clearly anyway, we got lots of time to talk to you guys. Sheldon, tell me about you know, what you saw when you came to Newfoundland.
Well, first of all, Seamus, thanks very much for inviting me. I'll only say that you go back to 5 1/4-inch discs. I go all the way back to the Apple II and a cassette recorder.
I have a cassette recorder.
So I beat you on that. I remember, Seamus, the first time I was in St. John's with you, and you're quite right. I came back and I said, there's everything here. And what I saw, it's hard to describe, but it's this sense of vitality, creativity, people that distinctively entrepreneurs. And then, of course, when you go down George Street, you see a special place. But it was also the way people interacted and the ability to have serendipity. And I came back and I said, it should all be downtown. It should be within the coffee shops, and you had all the major ingredients. Quite often we will say that it's about capital, markets, and talent. But there is the notion you can have all of that, but if you don't have the sense of creativity and togetherness of people who want to bump into each other and make good things happen,
Yeah.
You have something very special there. And for someone from the outside, you see it immediately. Perhaps when you're inside, you take it for granted, but it is very special.
Well, that's where we got your perspective. Mary, tell me, I mean, I know that you shared my excitement when the Verafin news hit, and you were like, more.
Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right, and it is absolutely terrific. And while my title doesn't actually fit on a business card, if you can believe it, because it's so long, what is it really? It's like my job is to help Canadian companies start. It help them scale, and then help them get access to the international markets. We often get the bragging rights of Canada being the only G7 country having a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. But those agreements are only good if our businesses can grow. And where do they start? They start at home. Craig talked about a couple of, he kind of, sort of rhymed off a number of companies right there anchored and based in Newfoundland. And they're totally on my list, but also there are others that are on that list too, right? I mean, so whether it's Kraken or Clear Risk or, 3F waste recovery, I mean, and what have we done as a federal government? Working with these businesses and for these businesses is what we put sort of what I call team trade, sort of team business around our businesses so that they experience no wrong door working with us. But in those terrific tech companies, they're getting CAN export support. So, Craig sort of said, it's about developing new IP that's created, anchored in Newfoundland. Terrific. But we here, and I guess I want to say to the companies and the entrepreneurs, like, let's work together here because small businesses become medium-sized businesses, and those businesses, when they grow into the international market, gets access to 70% of the world's economy. So it's very, very worthwhile for us to keep working together. And that's why it's so exciting to hear of Verafin and to hear of, like, I think Verafin's terrific, but I also think that all the small companies that are just growing and that are incubating and that are sort of, taking from ideas to ideas that then, that add a bit of entrepreneurship to it. And then I'll maybe sort of just end with this, as a bit of a plug. I just met with a group of terrific female entrepreneurs that actually created like an Atlantic Women's Venture Fund. I mean, and it's for it's for Atlantic Canada, but there's a very good anchor in Newfoundland. I don't think that would have happened, if it wasn't that there's all of this other great stuff happening. So you do, so I share what Sheldon is saying, and certainly you, Seamus. I mean, from the outside looking in, there is something really special, and what do we need to do to make, to do more of it?
You stole my question, Sheldon. What do we do to make more of it?
Well, I'm going to repeat one thing Craig said. Craig said Newfoundland is in a remote place. Well, it's truly physically in a remote place, but as far as markets and as far as technology, it is downtown everywhere. It's downtown Toronto, it's downtown Montreal, and therefore the opportunities that become available in thinking that you're close to everything changes quite dramatically. We'll be hearing later in the day about CAN Health, and it's an integrated market in health technology that literally puts St. John's right in the middle of Toronto, right in the middle of Montreal, right in the middle of Chicago, right in the middle of Vancouver. It's no further away than the hospital next door to you. The other thing, Seamus, I don't know if you're reading your email at 2 a.m., but around 2 a.m. I sent you an email that said that there's 35 companies that have identified Canada as a place that they want to move to out of a competition of 276. Right now, they probably don't even know of Newfoundland, let alone St. John's, but they should, and this brings both the combination of immigration and wealth creation at the same time. So I think it's to essentially explode your assets in such a way that you proudly display it to the world. And this world includes all of us in Canada. So I think you have the markets, you have talent, you have great post-secondary, you have to be able to be as close to capital as you are to markets, and you have the creativity. So I don't really think that there's anything that stands in your way, except the call it the sense of wonder to go for it. And you said one word that is so critical, Seamus: nimble.
Mm.
Governments can support the entrepreneurs by allowing them to be nimble, and you will capture your future.
You got to beat that, Mary. I'm going to actually just take a quick second, and for people who are watching, if you'd like to get a question in the chat, I'll try and get questions in here at the tail end of it. So please do. Steve here in the chat just said, yeah, Newfoundland and Labrador needs investment attraction. Let's get in front of those 35 companies. But I mean, nobody knows better than you internationally, Mary, what a competitive place it is. And then, you know, I guess your job is to sell not just Canada as a place for investment, but within that, you know, different provinces with different strengths and different, well, different strengths, I suppose. I'm just going to look at this positively. That's not an easy job. How do we get in front of that? It's a good question. Those 35 companies.
Absolutely. I mean, I sort of, I've stolen this line from Sheldon, so he doesn't mind, but I sort of say, you know, as the minister, like, what is my chief job? Like, I'm the sales and marketing person for Canada's companies to the markets in the world. So, and we've done a couple of things in the course of this pandemic, because you know that my perspective generally is, let's not, you know, let's you know, while it's difficult and we've got to do all the things that we need to do to support businesses to get through this pandemic, let's also make sure we're building those bridges that we need to, so that when the time is right, we are cultivating those customer relationships, those investor relationships in other parts of the world who are looking to come to Canada, who are looking for those partnerships, and where our companies can scale and grow. I know that there will be a panel a little later, as Sheldon says, around how to help our domestic companies scale, and we need to do that because the markets out internationally are competitive, and they are going to require scale. So we got to do that work. But in the meantime, you know, I am continuing to develop those international relationships. I took 2 virtual trade missions. So the very, you know, we know we're not able to travel right now. I mean, we're not, you know, Canada's in the same boat as many other countries. So, you know, so you sort of look for those willing partners that might do something with you. So I took a virtual trade mission to Korea. I took another one to the European Union. And just to give you the order of magnitude about the interest. I mean, normally when a minister takes a trade mission abroad, you get about 30 companies going to minister. To South Korea, I had over 200.
Yeah.
To the European Union, over a 3-day business summit, I had 1,100 businesses, right? So it says to me that you know, the markets are there. Canadian businesses want to go there, and it's my job to help you get there, and to, you know, and to put together these business to business, investor to business opportunities so that they can get in front of us. And I think that you know, Sheldon's absolutely right. You know, whether it's connecting across Canada, and these days it's connecting across the world. I mean, you know, I took businesses to over 2 other very, very big ponds, I mean, on both sides of our country. So that's the work that my team and I are doing, working with Canadian businesses, and we're going to keep doing that.
It's interesting, you know, one of the legacies, Sheldon, I'll throw this at you and you, Mary, but you bring up a really good point. I mean, look, I mean, you know, you guys are in Toronto, I'm here in St. John's, you know, but, you know, I've done from this setup here in my office, I've done G20 meetings, International Energy Association meetings, you know, all sorts of international meetings. I can attend them all at different times of the day. that is obviously going to have an effect on our companies. And today is a particularly rough day in Newfoundland. You've got a blustery old storm. We're dealing with a pandemic. We've got a provincial election. There's a lot going on here. But as we get through this and people get vaccinated, and we look, to spring coming and then summer and things getting under control, what we're on right here and how people are listening is going to stay with us. There's a legacy for this, and it doesn't. We all pine away for conferences. We all pine away for trade missions and the face-to-face. You still can't beat it. But this and all its promise is going to have an effect on companies, Sheldon, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that there will be this sense of as I've said, closeness that the world has become.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunities that technology provides to be able to have everyone feeling at the center of things. So I think there are increasing opportunities for companies. I think in maybe even 5 years ago, or even right before the pandemic, I think many companies thought, well, I have to leave Newfoundland because I have to be closer to the markets, or I have to leave Newfoundland to be closer to the capital necessary, or I have to leave, and you could fill in the blanks. And the reverse is also, well, I can't leave Toronto to go to Newfoundland. I can't leave X to go to Newfoundland. All of those are turning out to be excuses of the past. Mm-hmm. The challenge for governments is not to think in the past, but to be able to plan for the future. And that future brings companies back to Newfoundland, brings new companies into Newfoundland, and those that used to be able to see its future outside can see its future inside. But it really, as the minister says, it really is a Team Canada approach. Mm-hmm. I'll just say one thing. It's like a chain. And this famous saying that it's only as strong as the weakest link. And all of us have got to make sure that our links that are together for Team Canada, each of them are strong. Because if you have a weak link in place X, government Y, whatever it is, the Team Canada chain is weak. So it's really a challenge to all of us to think of the opportunities, not in a glass made up of 1990s or 2000s, but how about the glass of 2025?
Right.
The glass in 2030. And we have to challenge each other. So when someone says to me, well, you can't do it because, I literally get angry. Because that's the big excuse of doing nothing. The question is, okay, how do we do it? And that force of how are we going to do it, and the positivity that we do it together is what is the element of success.
Sheldon,
yeah. And you know what? Can I just
Sheldon
add on to this?
Oh, you're going to add. Give me 1 second. I just wanted to remind people. Sheldon's going to be, because I know Mary, you got to go. Sheldon's staying around to moderate a panel on medical and health tech. But Mary, you add to that, and I also just wanted to throw the question at you while we still have you. Just your advice to companies who are watching and to grow, to scale up. Take it away.
Well, you know what? I mean, I'm going to pick on the point that Sheldon said, which is, it is all there for us. It is all there for us. And if you ask me, what do I wake up and go to sleep thinking about every single day? It really is, Canadian small businesses anchored in Canada, but they're going to be global, and they're going to, many of your companies, particularly your tech companies, that they're so vibrant, they're starting global. Like it isn't like you start in one place and you sort of have these different steps. There are some that are there will be some that are like that, but but it is absolutely possible. And for us, and this, Seamus, as to Sheldon, I mean, we are very invested in making sure that Team Trade Canada is there to help our businesses. So the Trade Commissioner Service that operates in 160 countries around the world, It's Canada's best business development and sales team, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and they're there to help our Canadian businesses operate abroad. Capital around BDC and EDC, Canadian Commercial Corporation, that actually does government-to-government contracts. I mean, these are really important tools. And throughout the course of the pandemic, what we've done is sort of put them all together as Team Canada Trade, so that we are all rowing in the same way. It doesn't mean that there aren't bumps. It doesn't mean that there are some ways that need to work for the future, because our landscape is different now, but it is absolutely all doable. And it is very, very exciting, because I do think that we have new tools and different tools, and it's our collective will. And if people take anything away from me anyways, is that we've got your back. We're always going to have your back, and we're going to keep doing this because Canada is Canada has such a good reputation around the world. My goodness. And we need to capitalize on that and keep building on that.
And I know one thing that you're really good at, and you know this from helping so many companies grow with the digital media zone at Ryerson there at Yonge and Dundas in Toronto. It's an amazing space, and I was fortunate to spend some time there thanks to YouTube. Blew me away and inspired me. Is one of the things you do, Mary, is I think you're so many companies, and you've seen it firsthand, like I said, who are just so busy growing their companies, and their blinders are on, that they're not, they don't know what government may or may not be able to provide them. And you've been really good at getting in front of them, saying, hello, we're over here, we can actually really help you scale up and all that. Sheldon, I wanted to throw the same question at you in the few minutes that we have left in this session before I'll throw it over to Paul. What your initial advice, I guess, and you'll get into this more in your breakout session, to those companies who are watching on how they can scale up?
Well, I would answer it, Seamus, exactly as I would answer the question if you're in Vancouver, Montreal, anywhere in the world. Ultimately, you're solving a problem, you're building a product, and you need sales. And so, and you need the ability to have safe landings. You need the ability to fail and start again. There's no difference from success in Newfoundland versus downtown Toronto. And I think that's the message. It used to be that you would have additional problems or additional hurdles because of location, or because of lack of capital, or because of lack of talent. I don't think that is the case anymore. So what I would say to someone in St. John's, no different than I say in Toronto, build a product that someone wants to buy, and ultimately you'll be successful. But the beauty of it is that you have world markets right downtown Newfoundland now. And we have to make sure as a country that you have access to capital. The post-secondary institutions have to go put on the gas to make sure you have access to the talent needed.
Yeah.
And then the world, we bring the markets to Newfoundland. So you have it all. It's no different than the answer downtown Toronto.
Yeah. Sheldon, you're going to be there for the breakout session at 1 o'clock. Mary's already on the move there. Look at her, like just moving. My friend, thank you very much for joining us. And
thank you.
And we will have you back, I know, often and frequently. And thanks for your inspiration and your energy. I really appreciate, Mary, you being here. And Sheldon, we'll see you in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Seamus, for everything you do. Listen, folks, I sit around the cabinet table with him, and there's not a greater advocate and plug for Newfoundland than this fine friend of mine.
Mary, there's what goes on in cabinet stays in cabinet, but we'll make an exception with that compliment. I'll take that. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good one. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Paul Preston, everybody knows you. How you doing? I feel like you know what? I feel like I'm right back on Canada AM. I got to tell you, from one guest to another, one segment to another. Anyway, how you doing?
I'm well, despite the fact there's dogs and kids running around in the background and we're all juggling again, a year on into the pandemic.
Yeah. Anyway, we're safe, and I think we carried on with this obviously because it's safe, and we made a few adjustments. But really glad, thank you very much for hosting us and helping us put this together. Much appreciated, Paul.
Yes, thank you very much for helping to pull it together. We're sort of doing new age Zoom call, but yet I'm going to have to tell the Canadian AV folks when to transition my slides today. Originally, we were going to have socially distanced 3 or 4 panelists in studio with our AV provider, but because of the COVID case climb and because there was a fire in the West End that knocked out power, we've all sort of had to be nimble, speaking of that topic, and adjust here with a moment's notice. So if
listen, it's been so effortless, I wasn't even going to bring up the fire.
Yeah, it's
been so smooth. But now, anyway, you've done it now. But yeah, no, you guys have overcome a lot in very short order in just the past few hours, and much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, we got to be nimble and learn to juggle when we need to. So in a moment, you should see my slides pop up. But essentially, all I want to do is just take a few minutes to talk about the capacity in the tech sector, some of the challenges we see, but really focus on the opportunities as well. If you think about where we've been, if you could adjust the slide, please go to the next slide for me. If you think about the focus for us as an industry association, it is, yes, about advocacy and working with government partners and industry, and especially representing the interests of our members. So advocacy is always going to be a big part of what we do, and making everyone aware of the challenges and the opportunities in our sector. I would highlight this past year, it's certainly been a challenging year for a lot of our members. COVID hurt tech companies, although for some it might have been a little less difficult than, say, some other sectors. It still has hurt. One of the things we did early on, actually, with Minister O'Regan, was host a session with our CEO task force and talked about how a lot of the stimulus, the support programs weren't working for a lot of tech companies. So we had advocated for money to be given to ACOA because they know our tech companies, they could help with liquidity investments because a lot of the things like the wage subsidy didn't work. Us and others from Atlantic Canada are very pleased to see that our advocacy efforts resulted in 21 million going to ACOA locally for the RIF funding. Another 12 million has been committed to that pool of funds to help companies here locally. So big chunk of change to help our companies survive and come out in a stronger position post-pandemic. But apart from the advocacy stuff, we also try to take an active role in the ecosystem here when it's warranted. And if I were to tell you what our purpose statement is, really it's all about helping our members, our tech and innovation companies, to create new possibilities. How can we support them? And how do we help remove barriers? Our 3 priorities: talent's number 1, because it's been the biggest issue, the biggest challenge our companies have faced, and helping our companies with business scaling, whether it's attraction to capital, going to markets, et cetera. And the third thing for us is, although we're focused on the core tech sector and how do we grow that here, we also believe that we need to transition our economy into an innovation-based economy. We need to get all sectors to adopt and leverage technology and innovation investment. That's the only way we compete globally, is through that adoption and that really leveraging of technology investments. Next slide. So just to give you a sense, according to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, about 6,500 people are employed in tech-based roles in the province. It's about a $1.6 billion economy. APEC in Halifax also confirmed that recently with the study they have done. We know our average salaries, starting salaries, are competitive, and in some cases, when we look at the data, a little higher than national average, believe it or not, because of the demand for labor here and the shortage of labor. And yet 92% of our companies tell us they're expanding. They're going to grow. They're going to new markets. They're pivoting even despite the pandemic. 75% of our companies are going to be increasing their workforce in a significant way. When we look at the jobs that are in demand, though, it's not just those technical jobs, software development, coding, et cetera. It is sales and marketing, customer success, business development. Yes, it's the technical roles, and we know we have a shortage on the coding development side, but it's also those other business and softer skills. So we're really trying to share that message with the province that you've got an interest, If you've got an aptitude and you wonder about the tech sector, there's a place for you. Next slide. So I have to give credit here to Josh Green, the CEO of MISA, who originally gave me this slide and said, add to it as needed. This doesn't capture all of our tech companies in the province, but it certainly gives you an overview of just some of them, and a lot of amazing, strong companies here that we've seen develop. Some mature companies been around 15, 20, 30 years, and a host of newer companies as well. I would also say that when you look at these companies, we've got a support system here in the province now that's better than ever. Memorial Centre for Entrepreneurship, MCE, they've been recognized a couple of years now in a row as a top 5 new entrepreneurship center for their excellence. So top 5 in the world. When you look at, if you need incubation and startup support and services, Genesis Center currently has 26 companies. They've had tremendous growth in the last 3 or 4 years. And the growth for them over the next 5 to 10 years, the potential is enormous. So we need to find ways to continue to support the work of MCE and Genesis to scale up and to help support our companies. This slide could be 10 slides in 5 or 10 years if we get that support system right. And we've got amazing, amazing supports in the ecosystem here. Next slide. Give you a sense about the demographics. 84% export outside the province. 85% of the companies that are here, that are tech companies, were founded here. It's certainly a younger cohort. 55% of the workforce under 35. But the one stat we got to fix, and the minister earlier hinted at this, is we need more women in tech. Period. We need more diversity, period. But our women in tech scores right now, 23%. We need to increase that, and we all need to support initiatives that will increase that. We talk about the talent gap. We've got a cohort of diverse people here that we can leverage. So we need to ensure that we're working at that as well. Next slide. Some of the emerging stats, we've seen numbers, 2,000 jobs created in the next 4 to 5 years. Our Tech NL Fast 5, we call them, the 5 fastest growing companies. Conservative estimate is 500 to 750 hires in the next 3 to 4 years for those Tech NL Fast 5. 86% of our companies, though, tell us it's difficult or very difficult to find talent here, yet 92% are expanding. So there's some good news. The immigration target, 2,500 per year by 2022 is the provincial target, up from 1,700. That's great. And we need to ensure that we're targeting the experienced skill sets that we need, that we can't develop here quickly. Immigration is going to be a key part of how we grow in this sector. Next slide. So just about done here. Just to close out, I'd say first and foremost, for us, talent is going to be a key differentiator, and we can be nimble here. And I make the first point that if you look at short, medium, long-term strategies, first of all, we just need more diversity and we need more women in tech. That's going to bring us a long way to helping to fuel the growth of our companies here locally. There are some short-term things that are underway. Kean College, for example, has a new software development program. CNA started theirs this past September. Expanded class sizes. We're also talking about earmarking some of the labor market funding for tech retraining, for example. And the province announced their what they call their priority skills program to attract tech talent. On the medium term, we see post-secondary. We're working with Memorial and CNA to even increase their class sizes more. And the long term is really about K to 12. We just announced with the province, there's 2 new CNA level courses being offered in high schools. So when you graduate, that's post-secondary credit. We're underway with a new high school tech program. And part of that is to place up to 50 interns this summer, high school kids in tech companies this summer, to help them understand the opportunities here. Next slide. I'll just briefly say to close out, COVID has certainly impacted our companies. And we did our most recent survey in August, kind of showed us that although they've been impacted, 75% haven't reduced hours, laid off staff. They've pivoted to new markets, new opportunities, and they're really seizing the opportunity to do things differently. Next slide. And that is my spiel to give you a sense about the capacity in the sector. Minister, I'll pass it back to you.
So Paul, that was excellent. Thanks very much. And I know you're going to be with us for the day. So listen, we're going to take a 50-minute break so people can grab coffee and do whatever they need to do. Don't even bother starting a shovel because that doesn't look like it's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. But we'll take a break here now, and we'll see you all in 15 minutes. I'm seeing heads pop up. John, I see you. Chris. And it's that appointed time. So I'm live, I assume, and nobody's told me I shouldn't go, so I'm going to go ahead. Before I introduce our panelists for this next round, I know Brad, our director's got a tape from a friend who wanted to contribute here. Maybe you could roll that tape for me. John, I see you. Chris. It's that appointed time.
Bonjour tout le monde, mon nom est François-Philippe Champagne, le nouveau ministre de l'Innovation, de la Science et de l'Industrie du Canada. Alors, au nom de tous mes collègues et du gouvernement du Canada, je vous souhaite la bienvenue au sommet TechNL. Despite all the challenges that this global pandemic has made us confront, there are some very exciting things that are going on in this province tech sector. And supported by world-class incubators like Memorial University Genesis Center, the sky is really the limit. And I want all the players to know in Newfoundland and Labrador that we are committed to the sector, that we will help you to weather the current storm and grow into the future. So with that, je vous souhaite une très bonne conférence et j'ai hâte de vous rencontrer.
Merci, mon ami, Minister of Innovation, François-Philippe Champagne. I think so there are a few people out there who have met him when he's traveled, as he has frequently here to this province. And I remember he was in my office looking out at the harbor, and he said, you know, when I look out at St. John's Harbor, Seamus, it reminds me of Dubai. I thought, I have not heard that one before, but I will take it. But he was talking about the energy, not so much the weather, as he was talking about the energy and the potential, and that's what he saw there. So joining me now, and the idea of this panel is really to provide some guidance to all of us on how well, to SMEs that are watching, to people who are, to startups, to companies in the tech sector who are participating in this, how they can secure capital, how they can overcome challenges in growing their businesses and getting noticed in a very, very competitive marketplace. So joining us now, we have Mark Dobbin, President and CEO of Killer Capital, well known to many around here. Michael Denham, who's the President of BDC. Welcome, Michael, to Newfoundland. We've got Nicole LeBlanc from Urban Tech and Sustainability Investor. Chris Moyer, who's the director of Polaris NL Ventures, and John Phillips, CEO of Clister Credit Corp, Board of Directors of Shopify. I think I've gotten everybody. Thank you all very much for joining us. And of course, Craig Rowe. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just, and I'll remind people who are watching that we're taking your questions and we've got time, and I really do welcome your questions. So please get in the chat and fire away. But just maybe to get things started, and maybe I'll begin with you, Mark, and just talking about how, you know, it is a very competitive environment, and you know, we're not alone in terms of attracting investment, and it is a challenge faced in, you know, many other jurisdictions as well. What do we do collectively as a tech sector? Collectively, what do we do to get the attention of investors?
Well, you know, as you point out, we're part of an ecosystem here, and you have to have all the constituent parts in place for it to work properly. And when it comes to capital, we need a strong cadre of local investors to make sure that they give the initial lift to the companies at the very early stage, so that they can grow and become ready to receive investment from more specialist investors from outside our region, or at least outside Newfoundland and Labrador.
Okay, Chris, maybe I'll throw the same question to you, get you to weigh in. And by the way, I know, although this is kind of formal and that we're not in the same room, try and imagine that we were collectively in the same room. That's the idea. So if anybody says anything that you find truly offensive and you need to interject, don't hesitate, please. Maybe perhaps though, if somebody says something that you'd like to support or provide an example for, maybe that would be better. But let me throw the next one at you, Chris.
So on this panel, there's been over $50 million in investment in Newfoundland and Labrador, almost at the earliest stages of investment over the past 5 years. I think that's tremendous success. It's about, and the other thing about many of the investors on this panel is it's been about more than the investment. Yes, we're all in it for the money, but there's been a whole lot given back to the ecosystem.
Yeah.
You know, just so much volunteerism and willingness to help educate young entrepreneurs. So I think we need to continue to build the ecosystem. It's got the right pieces, but if some of those pieces aren't there, it will slow down. We need to, the local investment community, which I'm part of, needs to invest in those earliest stages. Then someone like the BDC can come along like they did with MISA, made a $3 million investment, as well as the EDC doing 1.8 million as that company developed and became more appropriate for later stage investors. So we've done so much over the last 5 years. We need to continue to do what we're doing. We need to bring more people, more local investors in, but that will happen. You know, great news with the Verafin exit. I'm sure there will be some angel investors come out of that.
Hopefully.
I'm sure there will.
Yeah.
And so we continue to build on it.
Yeah.
If there is competition, but the more local you are at the earliest stages, you can get to know your investors. Then as you grow and succeed, other investors will be there.
Nicole,
Sure.
how
If I
about
could
you?
just jump in and maybe
Okay,
build on
Michael, go ahead.
both those comments. And firstly, I do want to when we look across the non kind of major urban areas in Canada, angel investors play a key role. And I do want to kind of highlight the role that Mark's played over the years. And as you know, Minister, he was recognized as the Angel Investor of the Year last year. And it's not just, it's the investments he's made, it's his network, it's his coaching, he's mentoring. And I think he has made a huge difference in the community in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I do want to kind of highlight Mark's accomplishments and impact and the role that angel investors play. And then to Chris's point, we've been active, as you know, in investing. We're presence in Newfoundland and Labrador for a long time, and an equity investment presence for a long time. And the progress, as Chris highlights, over the past number of years has been significant. And we're talking about Verafin, but you look at MISA, you look at Colab, you look at Avalon Holographics, you look at Breathe Suite, you look at Rally, you look at the many kind of ocean tech investments. And we wouldn't have been having this conversation 5 or 6 years ago. So I think we need to acknowledge the progress that we've collectively been making in Newfoundland and Labrador. And then as you look ahead, Mark's right, there's an ecosystem angle, which is so important, because if it's not just about financing or talent or access to markets or mentorship, they all need to move in parallel. And the key thing to answer the question you put before us is to, for all entrepreneurs to recognize there is a kind of financing supply chain. I think go from angel to pre-seed to seed to Series A, et cetera. And I think the local, and whatever we can do to facilitate the connection amongst angel investors in the Atlantic provinces, I think would help. So you get more eyes looking at early stage ventures. And the more we can connect early stage GPs, Bill Ventures is present already, Venture Newfoundland is there, BDC is there. And the more we can just make sure that we're exposing local companies to the kind of next financing step that lies ahead, so that networks can be established and conversations can start before the funding rounds actually present themselves.
Thanks, Michael. Nicole, how about you? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said. It's good to see everybody. I haven't connected with all of you, some of you in a while. So, you know, having both been a local investor, so having had a portfolio of companies in Newfoundland at the early stage, and now now that I'm, you know, working for an urban tech fund in Europe, and, you know, kind of investing from away, I think, you know, both perspectives are great, where you actually have to start out local. So having the ecosystem around the early stage, you know, you can't scale unless you actually start. So I think it's really, really important that, you know, you have that local ecosystem to get you started, because founders are actually going to be, you know, what gets us out of, you know, the COVID crisis in a post-COVID world. Founders are going to be the one that brings technology innovation, you know, to our economy. So I think that's really, really important. And if you look at the work that has been done by some of the local partners, it's been great. And some of the work that's coming, you know, Kathy Bennett and what she's doing with Sandpiper, and, you know, really trying to unlock a lot of capital that typically hasn't been participating. So there are so many women that have been, you know, kind of committed to be an LP in this fund that weren't participating in the tech ecosystem before, and they easily could have been. So having that diversity element is really, really important. And it's also highlighting, you know, how many great women-led companies are now starting to emerge, you know, and can really start to play a role. So that's great. But then the scaling component is, now that I'm, an investor from away, our actually first investment was a Canadian company in Carbon Cure. And what really excited us about that is they are the global leader in their field. And so as you start to grow and, scale your company, it's really important to really focus, know your customer profile, and really, really start to own an area. And, investors from around the world will start to flock to you. It doesn't matter where you are. And so I think that's really, really important.
John, how about you?
James, I agree with what's been said, just because if I hadn't, I would have interrupted and overtalked somebody. But I would like to tip my hat to my favorite co-investor. As an angel investor, I rely on my co-investor, which is Shred. And Shred is critically important to all of the digital companies that I invest in. It should not be slowed down. Of course, we're always looking for integrity in Shred. But it's very important in my world. The Ocean Supercluster is going to be successful. It's taken a long time to get off the ground, but it will be important to our ocean technology. That's on the positive side. On the negative side, I think we have to up Memorial's game. I think it needs to produce more and better electrical engineers, computer scientists, and marketing and sales in the commerce or business schools. I think it's a huge opportunity for Memorial to make a big name for itself. And that will attract investors because they want the best and brightest in their portfolios.
Craig, maybe you can weigh in at this point after hearing everything, and I thought John's challenge towards our post-secondary institutions and perhaps those who fund them is a point well taken. Craig, over to you.
Yeah, it's a very good point. There's a lot of really, really great things happening, but as I mentioned earlier, there's always opportunity to improve. So capital, I started ClearRisk 14 years ago, and things have changed a lot in 14 years. Chris Moyer was involved early with GrowthWorks, and as was BDC. We've gotten a lot of support from BDC over the years. And as someone mentioned before, I think Michael, about Mark as a mentor. Mark's not an investor in ClearRisk, but Mark's always there to take a phone call or to get together to discuss what's going on and lend his insight. So the ecosystem is very important. Just to talk about the Verafin for a second and its opportunities and challenges. If Verafin is great. It's extremely positive. What it means for companies like ClearRisk and all the other companies is if you're going to have success, it creates bottlenecks in supply of capital, human capital, and financial capital, which is an essential part of our evolution as a successful tech ecosystem.
But it is a challenge.
It's a challenge, yeah. So there's only so much capital and there's only so much challenge. So we've got to work on both files. Like John said, Mon is not pumping up nearly enough people. That needs to be fixed as soon as possible. But there's other things that we can do, and we're working on it. It is great that Verafin has created a lot of, hopefully, potential investors. I think that's one of the things that a successful ecosystem has always created. So if you look at Silicon Valley or the Kitchener-Toronto corridor, it takes successful exits and people that make money in tech to invest in tech and inspire others. Newfoundland has traditionally been a bricks and mortar economy, and most of the high net worth individuals in terms of angels made their money on bricks and mortar. Now more and more you've seen over the past 5-10 years, people that made money in tech, understand tech, and see the value of investing in tech. So the more of that, the better, strongly encouraged. And the other thing I'd say is we can't just focus on the unicorns. Unicorns aren't created unless we've got a good solid base of small and medium companies. And every now and again, one will emerge. But I think it would be a sign of an incredible success in Newfoundland Labrador if we had hundreds of $1 million companies, $10 million companies.
Yes.
$1 million companies.
Michelle Sims, who you all know, CEO of Genesis Center, of course, but she's got a great question in the Q&A, and I'll just read it out to you. We all recognize that gender diversity and immigration is important to the growth of the technology sector. What role do you see investors playing in encouraging and fostering gender diversity and immigration in Newfoundland and Labrador? Any takers? Mark.
Yeah. So I think Michelle is absolutely right, and hitting the diversity issue first. At Killick, we have signed a diversity pledge that's been put together by participants in the ecosystem, and they've just come out with the latest version of that. So I encourage everybody. I'll see if I can get a link to that posted. Signing a pledge is good, but you've got to live by it. So one of the things that we do, for instance, to gender diversity, is we measure it. We measure it at 3 levels, or 4 now, because we do boards as well. And it's been improving. And one other thing we do is that we have focused where we think we can move it. So when we invest in female founders, but you can't take an all-male group of founders and parachute a female in. That's not going to work most times because the team's already formed. So we're promoting middle management. We think if we hit that really hard, that will be the future, and you're growing your own seed corn, so to speak. The other area where we're quite focused is board. We're not doing a great job there yet, but it is improving, and the percentage of female board members in the portfolio and in the broader community is improving significantly.
And Mark, I think, from our perspective, you and I sit on a board that we actively recruited in 2 female board of directors who are excellently qualified, but sometimes it takes hard work and more digging to get them. And I think there needs to be a commitment to that hard work. Instead of taking the easy path, someone you already know, dig a little and you can find wonderfully qualified, diverse group of people that will actually help propel the company, because everyone's buying your product. Everyone needs to be included at the board level.
And the other thing that I'd add, and I encourage anyone on this part of this discussion to bear this in mind, is we have a BDC, a Woman in Tech Fund. It's a $200 million fund that invests solely in women-led tech businesses. And this was put in place to basically address the issue that just empirically, it's a lot harder for women-led companies to raise than it is for all male companies. And that's not a function of the quality of the people or the potential of the company. It's just the inertia and the history. So we're trying to offset that with others. And that's another, and there are other funds like ours have been set up to provide visibility to and invest in women-led companies. So I encourage folks on the call to pay attention to us and other funds in this regard as well.
I think that's really important because it's not only about encouraging female founders, it's also having women participate as board members, as investors. Kind of a specific story is a Vancouver company I invested in when I was with BDC, and we've stayed connected and I still help him. And he's a very compelling immigrant entrepreneur. And he said, Nicole, like, I'm really happy that you invested in me. He says, because I don't look like any of the VCs that were out there, and they just didn't identify with me. And he's like, because there's not a lot of female founders, he's like, you couldn't find investors or companies that look like you either. So it worked out great for the both of us. And so I think it's just really important that, you really need to kind of go outside of your comfort zone and take one extra step with, that ethnic, that immigrant, that newcomer, that woman led company or founder. And really try and understand what's driving them, where they are. And maybe you're not ready to write a check to them, but maybe you're willing to mentor them or do something extra just to kind of, allow them to be, a participant in the marketplace. And the other element is getting women on cap tables, because there's a lot of equity, return that's built up over time. And if women aren't on cap tables, then women actually can't participate in that. So that's one of the drivers behind, what Sandpiper is doing, and really kind of engaging the entire Atlantic community to get more women on cap tables, either, as investors or as founders and people scaling companies.
That's terrific. I'm going to beat up on Munn again, if I might, Seamus. Let's improve the supply. And to improve the supply, we need more candidates in a diverse setting coming out of Munn and coming out of College of the North Atlantic. People who want to start a company in Newfoundland will start earlier on in the process. So let's catch them. Let's not have the best and brightest young women leave the island to go to university. Let's have them stay in the province. Let's have them go to MUN and have that MUN being the aspirational school where the best and brightest want to go.
I think if we're talking about ecosystem, having the three legs of the stool is really important. So academia plays such a key role in talent development, in attracting, people from outside the province to be able to come to school and then hopefully end up staying. R&D and all of the research that's being done, at the universities. And then you have the private sector that needs to step up and be anchor customers and, provide mentorship around the business aspects of, scaling a company, to be, investors, to participate in the venture capital community. And then you need government and policy. So, like what BDC has done with the Vicky program and the VCAP program and, all of the leadership that's been shown from a policy perspective, and then putting the dollars behind it. And then getting the government, to support with, different programs and funding. I think, all of those things, really flow together to really enable founders to start to have, jobs for these new grads to get into right off the bat, so that they don't go to a big corporate, that they actually get stuck into the technology and the founder role, and they're super excited about it. So I think, all of the three kind of legs of the stool really need to work together to build that ecosystem from the bottom up, and kind of to, maybe skip ahead and answer Wally's question that I saw there around, coming in for what's going to attract outside rounds. It's having that momentum at the early stages. It's all a funnel. So you have, the big bottom of the funnel that's always churning, and, companies will fail, and that's perfectly okay. But the ones that rise to the top end up being the global leaders in their vertical. And it just becomes a no-brainer as to why anybody from outside the province or the country would want to invest in a company. Right now, it doesn't matter where you are, right? Are you the global leader in your space? And being able to showcase that will attract investment from anyone.
Which is something that Sheldon Levy brought up earlier on. And you referring to Wally's question there in the Q&A there, Nicole. Wally was asking, while I think Mark and others have done very well with angel and seed investing and even Series A, companies in Newfoundland need to attract larger rounds outside of Newfoundland and Labrador. Is there a reason why larger VC funds don't or can't exist here for larger rounds, scale ups, etc.? Anybody weigh in?
I would have one point of view is, why do they need to exist there? Like, in all honesty, large pots of capital are global in nature.
Yeah.
You may argue, why isn't a partner located there? But to have an entire fund located, be able to draw those huge amount of capitals at Series A, Series B type funds, I'm not sure that's practical. Be the best companies you can, and the money will find you.
I'm going to qualify that. Chris and I actually, he finishes my sentences, and I've now, I've passed on my mantle to Chris and Mark as I retire. There are two kinds of companies. There's software companies that can scale, that venture capital really, really like. And then there are other companies. The industrial companies that make stuff that comes in a box, they probably need to sort out investors that are less venture capital oriented. One of the great things that COVID has done is they've shrunk our world. In the olden days, meaning 12 months ago, BC, meaning before COVID, venture capitalists like to say, we don't invest in anything beyond 2 hours from our head office. Now, it's 10 minutes. That's what it takes to get on a Zoom call or Google Meets call. There is absolutely no excuse whatsoever for Newfoundland companies to reach out to any investor in the entire world indiscriminately, namely without any sense of discrimination except possibly language and time zone.
Yeah.
So there are no excuses anymore. There is no whining about why aren't there venture capitalists on the island based in St. John's. You can base a venture capital company anywhere you want, Boise, Idaho, for all I care, and it's going to reach out and provide investment in the best and brightest in the world. So be the best. You'll get financing if you reach out and ask for it in a coherent, succinct way. Now, on the industrial side, namely not software, namely software that comes in a box, you've got a different problem because most conventional venture capitalists invest for the home run at the Series A level. They are looking for massive growth because they're going to fail 8 out of 10 times. So they're looking for the 9th and 10th to save them, in fact, give them the return so they can raise the next fund. So where do you go if you make stuff that comes in a box? That's a challenge. BDC has been terrific at filling that role, but it needs help. And you have to look around. The conventional venture capitalists don't do that kind of stuff because it's not in their business model.
You know, to come back to McLuhan and John, the point you raised and others, I mean, you know, the medium is the message. And I just look around at us, at this grouping. I don't even know where all of you are, and I know exactly where Mark is, but I mean, and the point being, you could be anywhere. I mean, I'm voting in the House of Commons from you know, downtown St. John's, and attending cabinet meetings from here, and a lot of this is going to stay with us. And with that in mind, I'm just, one of the questions that we got, Rob alludes to it here in the Q&A, but let me expand on it a bit. What, in terms of groups that want to approach you, groups looking for the support to approach a potential investor, tell me what you're looking for in terms of readiness, and when is the optimal time to seek you out? Who wants to take it first?
So I'm a very relationship-based
Nicole.
investor. I'm a very relationship-based investor. So it just depends on every fund. And I think that the best way to get an introduction to a fund is through their portfolio. So you should be interacting and networking, you know, with other founders in the sector. And so you understand what's going on and getting an intro that way. You know, worst case scenario, you email somebody or send them a note on LinkedIn. But I'm very relationship based. So I like to talk to you before you actually need anything. So I want to know what problem you're solving, what's driving you, maybe have a quarterly check-in. You tell me what your milestones are you hitting them? You know, maybe I'll start, you know, helping you and making introductions. And that's kind of an early test as a pre-due diligence element. You know, are you actually, you know, able to execute on what you've said you wanted to do? I'm opening my network. Are you responding? What are their impressions of you? So that's how I like to operate. Other VCs are the exact opposite. And they're like, when you have a round, I'm going to put you in the process and we'll go through that way. So I think it's really important to talk to, you know, A, identify your hit list of VCs, and then B, you know, talk to their other portfolio companies, see how they operate. You know, is it partner driven? Is it team driven? Like, how does the actual fund make investment decisions? And make sure that it's a fit for you. And then you have your list of groups that you want to tackle and that you know how best to approach them.
Chris,
one angle, just to add to that, and why Mark and others like John are so helpful, is that typically in a very early stage investor will be an angel. And with the right angel, you get minister answers to questions like that, because you get angels who are connected. They understand the GP landscape. They understand when the business is ready to raise funds at the right point in time. So just to build on what Nicole said, there's also a question of making sure you get the right kind of high quality, high caliber set of angels around it, because that will give you much more informed access to other sources of financing down the road.
As an investee, as a company that raises capital, I can weigh in here, and I mentioned about the change in the past 14 years. You know, venture capital companies, PEs, they have a sales pipeline just the same as these companies do. So we get contacted on a regular basis, always have, but by these companies that are building their pipeline. They're always looking for the next company. What John said earlier, before, you know, we found that 14 years ago, talking to investors, they wanted to be able to drive to the investment. That has, I can tell you from my perspective, completely changed. They're agnostic now. We're talking to investors all over North America. And some of them, to Nicole's point about building a relationship, we've been building a relationship for years. And some advice that I would give to the companies is to take those calls. Find ones that are a fit, that you think could be a potential fit, whether it's today or 5 years down the road, and nurture that relationship. Because let me tell you, there's nothing better, in my view, than a company that reaches out to you once a quarter or once a year. How's everything going? And when you can tell them, here's what we're doing today, here's what we're planning on doing, when they call you back 6 months or a year later, and you basically have accomplished what you said they're going to, that makes them real interesting. So there's capital out there. It doesn't need to be here. And the situation significantly improved, but you got to work it like anything else. Work those relationships.
Work it like anything else. John's nodding in agreement.
Absolutely. Greg's absolutely right. And I want to pick up on something that Nicole said, which is when pitching to a prospective investor, you want to have very clearly defined the problem you are solving, not the solution, not the fact that you're from Newfoundland, but it's all about the problem. And of course, with the problem comes, does the person that have the problem have the budget to solve the problem? And are there enough of them out there to make this a really big idea? Because if it's not a really big idea, they're not going to bother with it.
And I think there's one more really important thing that Nicole touched on, but I'd like to emphasize. Get to know who you're trying to get money from. The first thing is, one, just because you need money doesn't mean you're ready to raise money. Unfortunately, need doesn't mean you're ready. But get to know who you're talking to. Talking to a B or later investor in your pre-seed, it's never going to happen. They may talk to you, they may listen to you, because the one thing VCs and investors will do is listen to ideas in case in the future it becomes interesting. Just because they're listening doesn't mean they're going to invest. And get to know the investors, get to know if they're right for you. Talk to the companies they've invested in. Some investors are activists, some are, they'll give you a check and want to check, get a report. Find out who you need to build your business and who fits with that. And it's no different than selling your product. If you're a good salesperson and can sell your product, all getting investors' dollars is selling your company, you and your company, to the investors.
Yes, not your product. You do not sell your product to your investors. Over my 20-year, call it a career, as a full-time angel investor, I've made about 45 angel investments, sometimes stretching up to seed level. And I've lost a lot of money. So I am prepared to when I was active, prepared to talk to people about what they were going to do. And what I've learned, and I certainly didn't know this in the first part of the 20 years, but came to realize much later, is you need to be looking, I don't know, if you guys downhill ski and powder in trees, it's a really bad idea to try to avoid the tree in front of you. You're going to miss that anyway. It's the third tree down that you're going to hit. So think ahead. Okay, so you can raise the seed. So if I'm doing an angel thing and the guy's pre-qualified because he's got the problem, he's sort of into a solution, he's got some kind of market traction, knows who his market is. And I'll ask her, I'll say, all right now, you haven't got my money yet, but I'd like you to do your Series A deck, which you're going to use in 2 years from now. What does that deck look like? And it's sort of a cute test because it tests the imagination. And often software engineers fail because they're linear often. So trying to get the founder to imagine what her pitch to the Series A investor is going to be in a year and a half or 2 years is a really interesting exercise. And of course, if I'm doing Series A as an investor, I would be saying, great, what does your Series B deck look like in 2 years from now? Where are you trying to get to?
Yeah.
What's my money going to buy you from a value inflection standpoint? Will you have hit the value numbers that you need to achieve that A? And if you can't think that far ahead, you're going to hit that second or third tree for sure.
Right.
Minister, can I just add
go
one
ahead.
point? It's changing topics a bit, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
It has to do with the challenge of financing and fundraising in the context of a pandemic. And you kind of read the headlines, right? And life's great in tech. Tech companies are booming, tech IPOs, et cetera. So we actually did some research on that. And what's actually interesting is that's far from the story for early stage companies. And financing in VC was at a high watermark in Canada before the pandemic. And what's happened since is that for later stage investments, investment dollars have stayed very, very high. We're down, plus or minus 4% since the peak. So that's very, very good. But when you double click a bit and you look at Series A and earlier, we're down about 35% from where we were. And that's a very natural, expected thing to happen when times are tough. So I want to raise that just to encourage folks that are fundraising now to kind of be patient and hang tough. As the economy fully gets back to normal and as VC investment gets back to hopefully the way it was, things will happen more rapidly. But for now, I suspect if folks are having an issue in terms of the timing and pace of their efforts, it's explained by this macro trend. And there's basically a retreat to quality, a retreat to size that takes place in situations like this. So hang tough and be patient.
Good advice. I'm going to get in, and you can see in the Q&A there a question from Victoria. What advice would you give to young entrepreneurs in early stage development in terms of seeking and obtaining investment in their startups? I'm a woman entrepreneur in the tech sector. Is there any advice you'd give to young women entrepreneurs in terms of early investment opportunities? I'll throw it in.
Well, I'll jump in. I think that, I'm really excited for all of the innovation and the ingenuity that's coming out of the pandemic. And Michael, those are great stats. And I think that's a really important message to get out there is that, lots of companies were started in downturns in 2001, in 2008. And so I think that, as you're raising funding, you kind of have to be, in your company and on your company. You have to work both in your company and on your company. So, think about it. Like, what is the long-term strategic plan for your organization? What is your mission? What is your mandate? What is driving you long-term? And, you have to come up every now and then, which is why a board of directors or a board of advisors early can really help you with that, just forcing you to kind of go through that process, that formal process to really help you think through that. And then getting down into your business and getting into the nitty gritty. Okay, here are my actual financial forecasts for my first seed raise or my first pre-seed raise and how to go about that. So, for all of those founders starting out, there's tons of resources on the ground. Take advantage of all of them. Talk to everybody. Go for coffees. Ask people on LinkedIn. Get intros. And, don't just say, can I pick your brain? Say, here's my company. Here are the 3 challenges I'm having. Here are the 3 opportunities I'm having. Can you help me with X, Y, Z? I see you're an investor in this type of company that has a similar model. What are the pros? What are the cons? How does it work? So be very specific in your asks because then you'll actually get useful information back. So I think you really need to be hustling, hitting the ground, talking to as many people as possible. The one thing to remember is there's no right answer in startups, which is what makes it so difficult. Well, there's probably one wrong answer, but there's probably 5 right answers. You can go in any direction. And, you're going to get, the kind of joke is you put 3 VCs in a room, you get 6 different opinions. You need to be able to pull that all together, decipher that for yourself and think, what is the best path for my business? Because what might happen is you might realize VC is not for me. I need to actually go get debt financing or, revenue financing or some other form of financing. So I think it's just really important to, be very clear and articulate in your ask and kind of what you're trying to accomplish over the next 6, 12, 24 months. And then really start to think about how do you actually kind of, bring all of that information in, decipher it, and then put together the plan of action that you need in order to execute.
Nicole, I'm going to interject because Johan in the Q&A asked a good question, building on something you said, but building on what John said as well. And we've got about 7 minutes left before we bring in Adina Friedman, to the CEO and president of Nasdaq, to talk to her about obviously the Verifin acquisition. But Johan asks, he wanted to expand on John's point of not presenting the product to the investor. Is this assertion true for hardware-based products? So simply my question is, how important is the prototype to an angel investor? John.
May I speak to that, perhaps? So I've been angel investing in tech for 20 years. I'm an English lit major. I wouldn't know a piece of code if it hit me in the head or if I tripped over it. I don't care about product one bit. I care about what the target market thinks about the product. So if you've got a piece of hardware that's a piece of duct tape, coat hanger, and dental floss, and it fakes it and attracts market attention, and product includes price, so you have to put a price on it, not just get smiley faces, then you are demonstrating enough for an investor like me. So what's the product? The product is only a response to a problem. Define that problem really, really carefully and make sure that, again, as I said before, I'll repeat myself, that the problem is owned by someone who has the budget to solve that problem. There's no point having someone without a budget have a problem because no one's going to pay for your solution. Simple. I think that's it. Can I ask, since I've got the floor here for a moment?
Yes.
One last thought, or at least for me for the time being, is begging for money is something that I've spent a lifetime doing either for myself or for my companies or for clients. And it is a painful, humiliating process because you get turned down so darn often. Sometimes it's better to switch the table and instead of begging for money, audition the investors to see which one is going to be the best to enhance your business and your business objectives. So go around and ask the venture capitalist questions about what do they know about insurance risk? What do they know about genetics? How are they going to help your business? What do they know about getting thermostats into high-rise buildings in the Sun Belt?
Right.
What experience do they have with this kind of gear? And that way, one, you get to know really fast, as know is in N-O, really fast, which is efficient. And you get toward yes quicker as well, because you see if the chemistry is there and the commitment's there.
Maybe we could have the voice for Tech NL, right? Have all the investors lined up, and then you have to compete for the company.
Yeah.
Right.
Bringing it back to the product question, and this is a company Mark and I both invested in at the same time. And back to John's comment about duct tape and thermostats. When we first invested in Mesa, they didn't have a product. The one thing they did have was pre-sales. And I know that was important for my investment decision, along with the relationship I made with the two co-founders. But Mark, how much did those pre-sales mean for you?
They were everything. I mean, the relationship, the co-founders were very impressive young men, but our investment was driven by the fact that they had pre-sales. So many investors, it doesn't work with something like Sequence Bio, which we're both in along with John, but it's so important to have some form of revenue because we're not in the position, as John says, to judge the market reception. We need to take the market's temperature of that. And someone put it very succinctly, the other point John made, which I'd like to reinforce, and that is fall in love with the problem. Don't fall in love with the solution.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And the comment is, it's not what your product does, it's what it does for your customer.
Yeah.
And if you spend enough time polishing your product so it shines, it's a waste of time because your product's going to change in a year and a half anyway. Certainly software will get rewritten and redirected. Why understand the software? This is my justification. Why even spend any time looking at the software? It doesn't matter. It'll be different next year.
Yeah. Like I said, we've got Adina Friedman, President CEO of Nasdaq, coming up after this, and Florian's got a really good question. Actually, it pivots into my interview with her in a couple of minutes. And that was, what would you do practically to leverage the success of Verafin and the strength of the Newfoundland and Labrador startup community in general to recruit entrepreneurs and startups from outside Canada? I know it's a more general question, but I'd like you to weigh in on it if we could do a quick round. I'll begin, Craig, maybe with you.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. I think that I've said this to you before, Minister, that I think that if we can figure out, the ecosystem can figure out, and this is Nicole mentioned the three legs of the stool. If we can all figure out how to work together permanently, like we've worked together during the pandemic, to very quickly identify problems, to come together and find solutions and quickly make changes. I think that's the best way that we can be competitive in Newfoundland and Labrador globally, is to have a fantastic pipeline of talent like nobody else, and also to be nimble and to be able to make decisions. I would want to start a business in a place like that. So I think that we need to work on institutionalizing that cooperation and nimbleness.
John?
I'd love to see the Verafin guys lecture at MUN to the business class, the commerce class, the computer science class, etc. And I'd like everyone in the province who's interested in startups to recognize that it's a global marketplace. They can work anywhere and still live in Newfoundland, and anyone anywhere can work for a Newfoundland company.
Here. Mark?
I think I'd reinforce the theme we had of relationships. And Newfoundland and Labrador is on the map now for North American investors at the very least. So mine your Rolodex, get out there and take advantage of the window that's open right now.
Chris?
Be really exciting companies. That's going to attract the employees. If you've got a really interesting idea and you can sell that idea to investors, you could sell that idea to your customers, you've got to sell it to your employees too. Get them excited about your company, and either they'll work from away or they'll come.
Right on. Michael?
I'd agree with John. Start with MUN at an undergraduate and graduate level. Attract students from that are business inclined from out of the province, out of the country, and then provide that high quality support to channel them towards entrepreneurship.
Nicole, last word to you.
And so these large exits, it's not only about the actual dollars that flow back into the local market, it's about the talent that's been built up within that company. So, echoing John's comment, go lecture at the university, but also, really hoping to see 10 startups spin out of ex-Verifin people over the next 5 years in Newfoundland, because they now have the experience, building global companies. And so how can they, go out and start their own?
That's awesome. Okay.
Well, there won't be ex people out of Verifin, because they're just going to grow Verifin in the island bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right on. Thank you all very much, Craig, John, Michael, Chris, Nicole, Mark. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Well done, Mr. Minister. Thank you.
Right on. And now, without further ado, a guest of honor, Adina Friedman, the president and CEO of Nasdaq, of course. Very exciting, and perhaps one of the inspirations for this summit, actually, the primary inspiration, Adina, was Nasdaq's acquisition of Verifin, and that just took not only the country or the global software market, I would say, by storm, and made headlines all over the world. But boy, did you ever have an impact here. Welcome to Newfoundland and Labrador. And I know you've been waiting to get here since this started and this all started moving. And we were hoping to have you in person, but of course, pandemics being what they are and everything. But we are very, very happy to have you here. So thank you and welcome to Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you, Minister. It's great to be here. And I really cannot wait to be able to go in person. So I've been hearing great things about the entire province, but also the city of St. John. So I just can't wait.
Well, everybody's going to tell you where their best and their favorite fish and chip spot is. And the only way you're going to make everybody happy is if you go to all of them.
I love fish and chips, so that's fine with me.
Good for you. Tell me, and let me just say to everybody who's watching, please get in the Q&A. Adina is very happy to take your questions, and we've got a bit of time with her. So, please get in the Q&A, and I'm happy to moderate those questions. Let me ask you, first of all, maybe you could start by telling us how this company in Newfoundland and Labrador got on your radar, how it all came together.
Sure. Well, so maybe a little bit of background on why Nasdaq started to look in the space in general. But so thank you very much for having me. And it really is a pleasure to have a chance to talk to you all. Nasdaq today is a global technology company that serves the capital markets. So while everyone knows us as this great equities exchange, and we're really, really proud of being a great equities exchange, today we're actually a global provider of exchanges and exchange technology. We own and operate the largest options markets in the US, the equities markets, as well as owning and operating many of the markets in the Nordics, Nordic countries. And then we also have a global technology business where we provide the same technology that powers our own markets. We provide to 130 other exchanges around the world. And a big part of that actually is this concept of surveillance. So one of the technologies that we provide to the exchange industry and to broker dealers is an anti-financial crime technology focused on trading. So it's basically trading surveillance, market surveillance. The regulators use our technology, the exchanges use it, and broker dealers do it to root out market manipulation, insider trading, and other nefarious behaviors that may be occurring inside the markets. And so we started working with our broker-dealer clients about how can we continue to offer more. And they've been asking us, they've been saying, you do a good job of this, and we have more needs than what you provide. You're a great provider in this one area, but we have massive anti-money laundering challenges, fraud challenges. What more can you do? So we started evaluating all of the companies that provide anti-financial crime technology around the world. And we said, well, what are we looking for? So we're looking for a modern technology, a SaaS-based service, one that has a large clientele, that's really proven itself to be a great partner to the banks, and one that we feel that we can scale, right? So because, when we look at our business, it's very global. About a third of our revenue and surveillance is in Asia, a third in Europe, a third in the US. So we had an opportunity to look at the whole landscape, and Verafin came out on top. And for us, it doesn't matter where it's located. It's all about what their capabilities are and how and who they serve and do they do it well. And so we started to engage with the owner of Verafin at the time to say, is there any chance you'd think about, having Nasdaq consider an acquisition? And they absolutely love that. They love that portfolio company. I mean, I have to tell you that, Spectrum and Verafin have a really tight relationship. I think Spectrum's done a great job of enabling Verafin to grow and thrive. And they wanted to keep it as an investment, but at the same time, they're a private equity firm, and they knew, or a venture firm, and they knew that at some point they were going to have to exit. So they gave us an opportunity to speak to the founders, just to kind of understand, at the end of the day, what were they looking for? And through starting those conversations, we started to realize we have a lot of a common vision, a common culture, and a common opportunity to work together. And that's what started the conversations.
I remember when you and I first spoke, and I called you shortly after the deal was made public. And I guess, and you probably picked this up from my tone, even we're always so protective of our successful companies. And the concern obviously is when you've got a behemoth like Nasdaq, if you don't mind me saying, I mean, as a compliment, but if you've got Nasdaq coming in, the thought is, oh, there goes the company, there goes the people, we're going to lose them all. And not only what I loved about that first conversation, you really impressed upon me, not only was that not the case, but Nasdaq, as you operate, is quite the opposite.
Right.
I remember you telling me about a town in Sweden that you've got a number of employees. Anyway, go on, tell the story.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So we've been a global company for a long time, and when we make acquisitions, our whole idea is to make that, wherever that acquired company is operated, we want to make that a thriving part of our business, a thriving location for us. And so we've done many acquisitions, but I'll give you a couple of highlights. One of the acquisitions we did was to buy a company called OMX, which is the largest acquisition we've ever done. And it's the owner and operator of many of the exchanges in the Nordic countries. And then they also they were the pioneer of selling their technology to other exchanges. Well, Sweden today, Stockholm today, is actually our largest office in the world. So it's bigger than our New York presence. And then we also bought a second company in Sweden that's based in Umeå, which is a smaller town in northern Sweden. And that actually is becoming a really, really great tech hub for us because they have a good relationship with the local university, and they're able to bring in talent right out of the university. And that's becoming, just a really great opportunity for us to get wonderful talent in yet another part of Sweden that supports both our global tech business and our local exchanges. And then when we actually bought the technology for surveillance back in 2010, and that team is based in Australia. So they've become the cornerstone of our Australia office in Sydney. And we now have, many hundreds of people. I think it's 300 people in the Sydney office. And then also an office in London and in the US to support our surveillance business. So that's kind of how we do things. We have been users of Zoom/video conferencing for forever. So we kind of run the company that way. And for instance, I live in Washington, DC, and obviously I'm the CEO of Nasdaq in New York. So we've never really been as wedded to location as maybe other companies have, because there are great technologies that allow us to stay connected. So that's the way we've always thought of things. And what's great about Newfoundland and Labrador is you've got the university there. I think Verafin has done a spectacular job of the relationship with the university to bring in and draw in great talent, grow them within the organization. And we love that. That's just a fantastic model. So we really look forward to making that even a bigger part of our business.
Yeah, build on that for me, because I know that, you had said from the get-go, that you were interested in supporting the wider tech community here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's recognized just a little bit about our presence in Canada. So Nasdaq today owns and operates one of the larger competitor exchanges to TMX. So we have the Nasdaq Canada exchange there. And then we also have a business called Quandle, which is an alternative data business based in Toronto as well. And then we've actually been growing our talent in Canada, primarily in Toronto, but honestly, it could be anywhere in Canada, to support our technology business, because it's a big, fast growing business. And if anything, we need more and more great developers and engineers to come into Nasdaq. So we are very, very excited about being able to leverage our offices in Toronto and Newfoundland and Labrador to continue to expand our overall presence in Canada to support our global business. So that we do see Canada as being, a great location for us. I should mention that our CFO is from Canada, and so is our head of development for our markets business is from Canada as well. So they're great advocates for the Canadian connection.
That's good. That's good. We'll take that bias. That's great. But truth be told, it does cause companies, just to expand their horizons when you have people who are from other countries. But I mean, clearly the way that, as you said, you've been on Zoom for so long, and the kind of decentralized nature of Nasdaq, you're able to hit local nodes and local talent where you find them, not just through acquisition, but through growth.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, we really are not location driven when it comes to finding talent. Right. And now the one thing we do want to create though is an opportunity for them to feel connected and part of the culture. So for instance, if we were to expand the Newfoundland and Labrador presence to include other parts of Nasdaq's business, we'd want them to feel part of, they get the chance to be, of course, in the location with the Verafin team, but you also want them to feel a connection in to the group that they're working with, and you want them to feel like they have career opportunity within that location. And so that's something we're very cognizant of, to make sure that when we do either establish a presence somewhere or we acquire business that allows us to expand a presence, that we are thoughtful about how we do it so everyone there feels that they have a good career opportunity.
Michelle is asked a question in the Q&A, and you'll get to know Michelle Sims very well, CEO of Genesis Center. But she says, your commitment to growing the startup ecosystem in Newfoundland and Labrador, very impressive and appreciated. With this incredible fintech knowledge resident in Verafin here, do you see an opportunity for local startups to work on other challenges Nasdaq has in partnership with Verafin?
Oh, we're always looking for startups. So within Nasdaq, we have our own venture fund. And so there are two things to think about for Nasdaq. One is we do have a venture fund ourselves. So we are always looking for relevant technology. So the way that we run our venture fund is the technology has to be relevant to what we do, right? So it can't just be a generic tech company that has nothing to do with our business. And then also one of the businesses within Nasdaq has to sponsor that investment opportunity, that investment idea, to say, why does it fit strategically with the vision of their business? But we will fund pretty early stage. We don't do, I was listening to your last panel. Yeah. We don't tend to focus on pre-revenue companies, but so we do like to have, we're kind of maybe like, I guess, Series B type investors, where you want to know that there's at least one or two customers who are finding value in whatever they're providing. And that's to us an important proof point. But once you get to that point of having a paying customer or a few, then we do really look forward to meeting with companies that have relevance. It could be in the anti-financial crime space. It could be in the trading space. We have also a bunch of data analytics that support the investment community, including Quandle. So we have a lot of opportunities to work with startups.
You've made the concept of inclusive growth a central part of your strategy, and I talk about inclusion an awful lot in my role as Minister of Natural Resources. I mean, we're seeing how markets are moving on lowering emissions and lower carbon, but you got to make sure everybody is included in this, particularly out here, out this way. how oil and gas is such an important part of our economy, vital part of it, and making sure that workers are included as we lower those emissions and that sense of inclusion, it's necessary in order for us to do what we need to do in the energy space. Tell me about how you see inclusive growth in the tech space, and particularly in what Nasdaq does.
Well, I actually would take it a little bit broader. So because of the role that Nasdaq plays in the economy, particularly in the US and in Europe, we really do take our role pretty seriously in terms of thinking about the broader role of the economy. So, capitalism is a construct that, I was a political science major in college. I was not a technology major in college.
God help us, that makes two of us. Anyway.
and I studied capitalism, and I studied the communist system back then. And I truly believe that capitalism as a construct is the best model that can exist if it's executed well. I think what we have to reflect upon is, are we executing it well? And one of the things that I think we need to kind of reassert as a critical part of successful capitalism is giving opportunity to all, not giving opportunity to some. And I think that's where, both the public sector and the private sector need to work together to say, how do we make sure we're maximizing the opportunity to all? It doesn't mean that, it's not a communist system or a socialist system where there's a sense of entitlement, but more a sense of opportunity. And if you do not have a level playing field to start with, and you do not have equal opportunity to opportunity, so equal opportunity to opportunity, then I think that's where the capitalist system really needs to do some real self-reflection. So where you've started to see, at least within the private sector, is a sense of responsibility beyond the shareholders. It doesn't mean that it's an either or. It can be an and. You can do the right thing for your shareholders and run your company in a way that supports communities and supports your employees. And so I think that's the new paradigm that many of the companies in the private sector are realizing, that we have a responsibility to be a part of our communities, to do the right thing for our employees, and to deliver returns for shareholders. And I think if we all really think it's not just words anymore, you're starting to see actions behind that. And if we can turn those words into actions, I think we can actually start to at least try to achieve the ideal of capitalism. So that's what we believe in, and that's how we think about running our own company, but also how we are working with our own listed companies. We have 4,000 companies that list on Nasdaq in the US and Europe, and how we work with them to help them think through that paradigm and communicate that paradigm to their own shareholders and clients. So that's a big part of our role today.
Two political science majors could take this interview in a completely.
Yes, we could go
totally right off on a tangent. I got to be very careful. But let me ask you, going back to perhaps what you guys learned in your acquisition of companies, like what was the name of the community in Sweden again?
Umeå.
Umeå. What were the lessons that you learned from that, and that may be brought to bear as you now become a part of Newfoundland and Labrador's tech community?
Well, I think the first thing is that leadership is very important within the local, the local location. So, one of the things we've spent a lot of time talking with Jamie about, and as well as Ray and Brandon, is how do we make sure that we maintain a really strong leadership, a strong team, that they're highly motivated, that they understand that they are a part of a bigger company, but they are a company themselves, and giving them the independence and the ability to continue to run the business successfully in the local location. And I think that's in making their own decisions. And we've created a construct that between Verafin and Nasdaq that we think will allow them to continue to be, great leaders and continue to run the company largely independently, but with some overlay within Nasdaq. I mean, we are a public company, so there's some public company stuff that needs to be introduced, and then also, but then getting the best of us. So, we have a global presence. We have relationships with the largest banks in the world. We have the ability from an engineering perspective, potentially to help them as they're doing some really interesting and new things with the technology. And then they have a huge amount. I mean, they do weekly releases, by the way, which is just incredible. So, how do they do that? How do they manage in such an agile way to be able to deliver new features and capabilities to their clients every week? It's an amazing technology. So we're really excited to learn from them too. But that ability to learn from each other, but then to have great leadership within the local presence is going to be critical to the success.
I opened the session by talking about how I studied in Ireland for a year, and studied particularly the Celtic Tiger way back in the 90s. But one thing that Ireland had, and we have here in this province, is an incredible kind of sense of belonging to the place that not everybody has. I mean, the old joke is that how can you tell the Newfoundlanders in heaven? They're the ones who just want to go home. It's true, trust me. Not everybody does. I hate saying that about all Newfoundlanders and then Labradorians. I know many of them all over the world who are very happy to get away. But I know that when because you told me when you met with Brendan and with Jane and Ray, I mean, they were like, "We're staying." How you feel about that, more or less? Is that how the conversation began?
Yeah, it was a very quick conversation because I'm like, thank goodness.
Right, exactly.
So first of all, I have heard a lot about the level of loyalty that the Newfoundland and Labradorians have for their local, for their local communities, for each other. The sense of community within Verafin is really, really strong. And even though we haven't had a chance to be together in person, even on Zoom, we get it. Like we've done some social happy hour type things together, and unfortunately, it's just not nearly as it doesn't. No, it's not the same. But we get the sense of this great. I mean, they're a family, and they do a really wonderful job of making decisions together, driving the business together. And staying together. And yes, I've heard a lot about people who say, we've gone away and then we've always come home. Like it's just this sense. And I can't wait to get there and feel it and understand it, because I think that sounds like it's a very special place.
We got a question from Chandra who asks, what are the most effective steps that can be taken to engender ideas and support the growth and development of early stage companies in order to fill the Newfoundland and Labrador pipeline with future success stories like Verafin? I guess what are you looking for?
Yeah, I think that there's within the financial technology space, so I can kind of answer it within that space. First of all, it is kind of startup heaven right now for the fintech space. So fintech is, think about it this way. I'll just give you an example. Just in the anti-financial crime space, it's a $12 billion TAM, right? Total market opportunity. It's growing at 17% a year, which is, of course, why it's very attractive to us as a business to become the leading provider of anti-financial crime technology in the world. It is a massive market opportunity, but it's also ever changing. I think of anti-financial crime like I think of IT security. The nefarious players are going to use every bit of technology available to them to try to do bad things, to try to do harm. And so therefore, those who are in the protection business have to be using every bit of new technology to try to make sure that they're protecting the system. That is our job, in the anti-financial crime space. That's the IT security job that many companies have. And you think about the level of innovation and the number of startups in the IT security space. It is massive, and it's constant. And there are these very specific parts of the world that have great expertise in that area. And now you've got a scaled business in Newfoundland and Labrador in the anti-financial crime space. So what can you do to help think about the next problem that's coming, and leverage that to using the latest technology to try to solve the next problem and the next problem. There are always going to be niche players in anti-financial crime. And Nasdaq and Verafin together are going to want to figure out, well, maybe that's a company we want to partner with. Maybe it's a company we want to integrate onto our platform. Maybe it's a company we want to ultimately buy, but recognize that Newfoundland and Labrador are on the map as an anti-financial crime center. So what can you do with that to create the next set of startups that can solve the big problem?
It's very interesting. The balancing act between what we've seen here, what's happened over the course of the pandemic. As you said, Nasdaq was well ahead on video conferencing and Zoom and everything. But now, after a year, we've all kind of caught up to this. And it's interesting because it offers all sorts of opportunities, particularly for companies that, are located on this island in the middle of the North Atlantic or in Labrador, on the edge of the Canadian Shield. But at the same time, there is that juxtaposition with culture, with, as you said, like it's just not the same unless you can chat with people. I find one thing that's unfortunate is that I miss kind of scuttlebutt. I miss, kind of gossip at the water cooler kind of thing. I'm talking to people all the time from all over the world, Washington, D.C., like you here, and yet everything's scheduled and by appointment, and you kind of miss just the intermingling, bumping into somebody at a pub or a coffee house, getting to know somebody outside of perhaps your culture or environment, and kind of get new ideas from them or a new perspective. Anyway, how do you guys cope with it?
Yeah, I miss that a lot, and that's what I love is kind of, I don't do it all the time because sometimes you kind of get trapped. I kind of feel like sometimes I get trapped in meeting worlds where I'm, meeting, and then I leave. But on those moments when I get to walk the floor and just hang out with the employees and just have a good time, I actually, number one, I learn a lot. Number two, there's usually a good idea that comes out of it or something. And the idea can be little, like, gosh, I wish we had better coffee. I got that one. I was like, okay, guys, what are we doing about getting better coffee? Or it can be, I had an employee in Stockholm come up and talk about meditation and what they can do to introduce meditation to the employees there. So it can be little things, or it can be the next big idea. How have we thought about getting into this space, or you just don't get that when you are on just scheduled calls. It's just so hard to be able to get that. So I do miss it. I do think it is important. That's why I said within each location, we at least try to create a sense of career and opportunity so that we don't want people to feel isolated. We want them to be a part of the culture, but we also believe that there's talent all over the world. So we shouldn't limit ourselves to certain geographies. So we've got to find a way to harness that talent we have, as I said, offices in 30 countries, but we have large scale offices in Lithuania, in Stockholm, in Denmark, Finland, Iceland, as well as in Bangalore, India, in Australia, Manila, Singapore, Hong Kong. So we have the chance to get perspectives from all over the world to build out those centers and make it so that we can attract great talent regardless of kind of where they're from. So that's the construct that we like to try.
Yeah, and I guess the trick for a lot of companies that are out there is kind of retaining all these newfound opportunities for exposure, to have meetings with anybody around the world now, and relatively intimate meetings now. I mean, in that it's it doesn't freeze up as much as it used to. You can pick up off each other's visual cues. Like it's amazing, and it's way better than a speakerphone, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we still do appreciate physical proximity and creating specific corporate culture. As you acknowledge, that was one of the selling points to you of Verafin, is that they had created this amazing culture that comes from people kind of working on top of one another.
So one way to do it is, I look at it this way. There are certain jobs that actually very much lend themselves where they could very easily be remote. Yeah. And software development jobs, testing, coding, those types of jobs, actually, you can have a terrific remote workforce to support a tech business. However, even if they're all remote, and I do know companies that have no headquarters, they have run their company from the very beginning as a Zoom business. And so they just don't even have a headquarters. Yeah. That one is a little further afield, but let's just say that you decide that you want to run a tech company and you want to grab the great talent both in Newfoundland and Labrador and outside. The one thing to try to think about is, how do you bring them together at least a couple of times a year so that they do feel that sense of center, they do get to know each other in a casual setting, they do have that chance to contribute in a different way. And that will, I think that has a long half-life, as they get back to their desk and they continue to work. And that's something that I would say for every startup, think about it as both, yes, you can leverage a remote employee base, but find those moments when you bring them back to the center and use Newfoundland and Labrador as a place, right? I mean, it's a really interesting place. So if that's, why not that's like every couple, 4 to 6 months, you get the people together there. And it's such a unique place that it's going to become special. It's going to become
funny because, when people would start off with office parties, by Zoom, or we're going to get together. I think a lot of people were just like, oh, it's so contrived. But I think a year into this, like, you crave it. Just kind of like, hey, we're just going to get together and just
totally
talk,
yes.
About whatever, pour a glass of wine, pour whatever you're drinking, and just talk. Yeah. Let me get back to culture, specifically to Nasdaq, and culture change, because when you got in there, I mean, it was primarily, we saw it as an exchange company, and you've transformed it into, it's a technology company now. It's a tech company. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, Nasdaq turned 50 this week.
Right.
On Monday. So
happy anniversary.
Thank you. We had a lot of fun with that. And we have this great video, if it's a 2-minute video that's really cool, that kind of shows the highlights of our history. But the we started off as a tech innovator in the exchange space. So in 1971, we created the first electronic market, and it was really an electronic quote system. But in 1971, like this is right when computers were, kind of entering the commercial landscape, and so we created a essentially a quotation system, and then we turned that into a true market over the coming 20 years, and then we turned it into the stock market for the next 100 years. We turned it into the home to innovative growth companies. We turned it into the fastest and most, innovative exchange from a technology perspective. And then we decided to expand significantly. So as I mentioned, the OMX acquisition in the Nordics really did transform Nasdaq because number one, we went global. But number two, the market technology business within OMX was this hidden gem in a space where you have to be great at technology. You can't be supplying the world's exchanges with technology if you're not the best at it. And so that really did allow us to develop out our technology, talent in the way that we run our business as a technology company. And then we, as I mentioned, have the surveillance technology today. We now have a whole suite of data and analytics capabilities for the buy side that's all SaaS and technology driven. And so it allowed us to continue to expand and transform who we were. And you'd say, well, why? Like, why Nasdaq? And I think that you have to think about what is an exchange. An exchange sits at the center of the capital markets. Our companies, we develop very deep relationships with companies who want to go public and list on the exchange. We develop very deep relationships with broker dealers who trade on our exchange. We develop very strong relationships with the buy side, the ultimate end user investors who rely on our exchange. And then for Nasdaq, we had this special thing where we have all these relationships with other exchanges. So what more can we do for these great clients? We had with the corporates, they really need help with their investor relations and governance programs. And so we have two really neat SaaS services, SaaS businesses that support their investor relations and their board portal needs. With the broker dealers, surveillance is the big one. Anti-financial crime is is kind of a huge way for us to support our broker dealers beyond the exchange, and it's very relevant to being an exchange. Integrity, fairness, all of those aspects of being an exchange operator obviously can very, very well into anti-financial crime. On the data and the investment community, it's all about workflow and data analytics. So we've had a chance to kind of look at how we globalize our business and how we grow into becoming a great technology partner to our clients. And it's worked out really well so far.
Tell me about that leap to take OMX. That's very interesting because that was obviously, like you said, I mean, it makes acquisition of a company like Verifin a little easier, I guess, because it was trodden ground for you at that point. But corporately, it must have been a bit of it was a leap.
It was. So actually, it was. So we made the acquisition. Well, we signed it in 2007 and closed in 2008. And I was the head of strategy at the time, so I led that deal. But it was actually on the back of two other acquisitions. So we, in 2005, bought iNet, which is actually our technology stack that powers our markets and many others today. And then we also acquired the Philadelphia Exchange, which was a large options market. And then we that was actually did that at the same time as OMX. But OMX was a big leap for us because it took us out of the US. So that was our first acquisition that took us out of the US. And we had to learn how to become a global business. And frankly, our colleagues in the Nordics had to teach us how to be a global business. And that was a big cultural shift for us, big cultural shift. That's when we put in video conferencing capabilities. We have these, what we call telepresence rooms in our offices, where it's an all-encompassing room where you all feel like you're at the same table, but you're a video away.
They work
really well. Yeah, they work really, really well. And we had to change kind of, before all the leadership team, it kind of was all in New York or DC. And then suddenly we had, a lot of colleagues and senior colleagues in Europe. So OMX was a big paradigm shift for us. And then also they were supporting businesses all over the world. Our largest footprint for our technology business is in Asia. So we have scaled our offices in Asia to support our tech clients there. Time zone changes, like it just changed everything and how we ran the business. And I think it was such an important evolutionary step for us, in some ways revolutionary step for us, to kind of set the landscape and the foundation to become that global technology provider.
I've often thought of that as a big advantage for us here in Newfoundland and Labrador, on the island of Newfoundland. Anyway, you know, everybody's got to get used to that half hour. But other than that, I mean, you're perfectly situated here, I think, to deal with, you know, European markets, just in terms of time zone and, you know, the ability to make meetings and stuff. But between Europe and at least the eastern seaboard of the U.S.
Oh yeah, I actually agree. So a woman who, you know, working at Nasdaq named Valerie Banner Thurner, she's actually the woman that runs all of our technology for the broker-dealer community, and she's the one who's really actually developed the strategy around anti-financial crime and has then executed and really led the acquisition discussions with Verafin. She's based in Austria, actually. So she's not based in the US, and our market technology business leader is based in Sweden. And so having it only be 4.5 hours instead of 6 is great for her.
Right.
It's much better for them. It kind of creates a lot more crossover hours with the European business, and even with Australia, which is, you know, for us is actually a real challenge. So I think you're right. I actually think, you know, so same with like Iceland. Iceland is 4 hours ahead of us. That's a perfect time zone.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you mean though.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what I do, actually, I deal with people in Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, here in Canada, and that's, you know, just means that I eat supper a little later than most people, because you're working later on in the evening.
Right.
Do you have, I mean, this world right now in the pandemic, you know, as we all muddle our way through it, and we can see the light now, but things have changed, and I think smaller markets now, because of this technology, me here in St. John's and you in DC, suddenly smaller jurisdictions have a much bigger and clearer advantage.
Yeah, I would agree. I actually think this is going to reorient. I've been thinking about it a lot, frankly, just in the context of the US. I think it's going to reorient the workforce. You're seeing a lot of people leave the coastal cities and to go into some more of the Midwestern cities, and either to go home, you know, to go back to their childhood home, or to relocate. I've known a lot of people, honestly, who've left New York to go and live in Denver, or to live in Ohio, or to live somewhere else in the country. And I think it's gonna, I'm hoping, I'm like kind of cross my fingers, it kind of recalibrates the country a little bit and spreads the talent and spreads the opportunity to more of the country.
Hear, hear.
Because of the fact that we're not going to be as locationally centric in the way that we run our businesses. And I actually am quite open to that. We've had, for instance, our CFO friend, by the way, has been living north of Toronto now since March. And it doesn't matter, right? So, you know, it doesn't matter at all. Now, I think it's harder to get to know a new employee, but once there's already a trusting a relationship, it doesn't really matter as much where they are all the time. So I do agree that I think it's going to give some of the smaller cities and, a bigger opportunity to keep talent, if not attract it.
I have a director of policy, and he's a senior member of my team. I talk to him every day. And one time he was talking about this place, a restaurant or something he's just been in Toronto. And I said, "Oh, I didn't know you were in Toronto." And he's like, "There's a silence." He went, "I've been here for 8 months." I didn't know. It didn't matter. But there's an economist, a guy I know, Mike Novin, and he talks about one of the biggest drivers of talent over the past 20, 30, 40 years, if not more, has been marriage. So when you have, two people, they finish university or college or whatever, they would generally both have what he terms somewhere jobs. They have to be in a specific location in order to do the job. And if both of them, in this day and age we live in, thankfully, where both partners are equal and both have equal opportunity in their career, they often are attracted to cities that have to be very big in order for them to both have the depth, for the city to have the depth that both of them can realize their ambitions, right? I mean, so in Canada, Toronto. In the States, whether it's, San Francisco area for tech, or, New York, Boston, but you're drawn out of the Midwest, the flyover states, as they say, and you're going to the coast. Now, you might have one person who has a somewhere job. They have to be location specific, but the other person could have what he terms an anywhere job. they could be doing whatever they're doing, perhaps in this sector, from anywhere. And increasingly, you may see two people who have anywhere jobs, and both of them can move to wherever they want.
Yeah, I actually think that's right. I think that's sure. It's if you want to think about it though, careers are long. I always say, you know, when you're in your 20s, you think that next year is going to be critically important, but careers are 40 years. You know, we probably work for, I like to think that I'll be working for even more than 40 years, but let's just say 40 years. and so you do want to think through, what does that mean for, of course, grabbing an opportunity when you're in your 20s and you're single, and you know, go for it, go wherever it's going to take you. But at some point, you're going to want to have a place where you can raise a family. You're going to want to have a place where there is opportunity for both of you. Or if you are remote, just make sure that that remote work is a long-term opportunity, right? So, because then you don't want to kind of be in a situation where, oh, for a year or two it works, but then suddenly you then have to look inside the city you're in to try to find opportunities. So just be mindful of it, especially as you're settling with kids, that you want it to be long-term. And frankly, that's where going, you know, whether you're in Columbus, Ohio, and you're in Newfoundland and Labrador, you know, you can look and realize that there are great opportunities for you to be able to raise kids and have a long-term career. That, I think that's a great balance. It's frankly the reason we never moved to New York. I mean, Washington's not a small city, but it's not a big one either. But it's home. I grew up in Baltimore, so not far away, and I've always lived in Maryland, but I didn't want to raise the kids in New York. You know, we wanted to have a little bit of a different life than what New York brings, but we made it work. You know, we just made it work.
Yeah, indeed. We've got about 4 minutes left, and Adina, I think it's a really good opportunity just to build on what you were saying. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are out there watching. You are the newest and biggest entrant into the Newfoundland and Labrador tech sector. It is really, really exciting, and I'm, you know, very thankful we got to spend so much time with you. Tell everybody who's watching, you know, what is your vision? How do you see things moving from here?
Sure. Well, I think Jamie and I have very much a common vision. Our job is to fight crime. And our job is to become the largest and best provider of anti-financial crime technology in the world. That's our job, to work together to achieve that vision. And so what does that mean? Today, Verafin has 2,000 clients in North America. They started off with the smallest banks. They provided a very nimble, very light touch anti-financial crime technology, meaning fraud detection, anti-money laundering detection, investigation capabilities for the smallest banks. And then they moved up to, I would say tier 4 to tier 3 banks. And they've really, really done a great job of penetrating and serving those clients very successfully. They now have solutions that really are geared towards tier 2 banks. And they've been able to really start that journey of penetrating that clientele. Where Nasdaq really starts to provide a huge value to them is in the tier 2s and tier 1s, because our clients tend to be the tier 1 banks and tier 2s. So we have an opportunity to help them open doors with their current solution into tier 2 banks. We then also have an opportunity to work with them to really develop out the functionality to serve the tier 1 banks. And once they're there, that takes them global, right? Because there's no doubt that a tier 1 bank is not a US only institution. So we then have a chance to really help them establish themselves in Europe and over time across the world as the solution provider for crime management. And then on top of that, they already serve a consortium of tier 1 banks with a very unique solution that's basically collaborating with law enforcement around some certain parts of the financial crime issues. And they have an opportunity we have an opportunity together to find ways to replicate that kind of consortium approach in other parts of the world. So we have just a huge runway of opportunity to really together to be the best and the biggest in the space.
Adina, you're gonna, when you get here, hopefully soon, to Newfoundland and Labrador and to the St. John's area, people will be clamoring to take you out for fish and chips. I'm sure you'll get to Leo's, you'll get to perhaps Keats and the Ghouls, you'll get the famous Chesses. The Duke of Duckworth is very good. I will probably take you to Chafe's Landing, and just to give you an idea of how fresh the fish is, when I brought the Prime Minister there, he asked the owner, he said, "So, is the fish fresh here?" And she looked at him like, and she said, "Did you see a small little boat come in on your way in here?" And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "That's your fish."
That's awesome.
So that's where I'll take you.
Yeah, we actually have a place, or my parents, I should say, have a place in an island off the coast of Maine. And so of course, lobster is everything, right? So we do the same thing. You know, we work with the locals. They go and they basically catch the lobster and we eat it for dinner. So I love that. It's like the best. So it sounds wonderful, and I can't wait to give it a go. And sounds like that's a lot of fish and chips though. So I might need to do it over multiple trips.
Take you a hike up Signal Hill. There's lots of walk and lots of, you'll listen.
There we go.
You'll figure it out a way to work it off, but
That
fish and
sounds
chips is very
good.
important. We can't wait to have you here. Adina, thank you very much. I know you got a very busy day ahead of you, and appreciate all the time that we got with you today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, very good. And I think now we're going to begin the breakout sessions. So everybody should know where to go. And then we'll be speaking to you after that. I'm going to be hopping into all three of them at some point or another and just taking notes on what everybody has to say. But Adina, I can see you're still there. Thank you again very much. It's great to chat with you. And we'll see you in the breakout sessions. Thank you.